You can't divorce yourself from awareness, the basic fact of experiencing. It's that which is indisputable. Experiencing is the great equalizer. Every experience held within experiencing and also made of pure experiencing is equal in nature, is equal in appreciation. All of what arises in awareness is actually arising as awareness. It's only about seeing what already is. It's only about recognizing, only about appreciating the isness of life, the just isness of experiencing. There is no separate you or separate ego that has to attain that. You are this space of wakefulness. What the ego entity is the perception of lack, the perception of disconnection. Peel back those concepts, those assumptions. Any experience is never not the experiencing fact.
That's the dualistic perspective from these unfindable things called egos that we seem to function through. We think we're a person experiencing. Our temptation is to try and leave stuff out of reality or push it out of reality somehow, you know. And as it turns out, this person is appearing within boundless experiencing, this just seamless flowing of reality, simultaneously swimming in the ocean of reality and are the ocean of reality. In the bigger context of things, we are the ocean itself, and we can't possibly be separated from it. What you are is not at war with anything. It's so simple that it's overlooked, apparently. Cut straight through by going straight to your experience, straight to the texture, the feel of your experience. Your direct experiencing, that fact, is that power that is infusing everything, the isness of all things. You can't really put a name to that or kind of try and cut it up into pieces or anything. It just is what it is. You are saturated with what you're seeking for. If you know it undoubtedly, anything's kind of allowed to arise, and there's kind of a lightness to it.
You're listening to the Nonduality podcast. This is Nick Hyam from nisargayoga.com, and as ever, I'm joined by Paul Dobson.
Really, everything is referring to just this basic fact of experiencing. The engine that's running the whole thing, that is the power, the core of what all this is. It's nothing that can be labelled as a thing. It's kind of this flow. The only way we limit it is with our imagination and ideas and stuff that we put on top of it, the concepts, the frameworks, the intellectualizing, the stories about what is going on here. But actually the presence in itself, that raw presence, that raw seeing, that raw hearing, that raw feeling, is a portal straight to the absolute, because it is the absolute.
Yeah, the basic fact of happening, the basic fact of experiencing. We always return to this basic fact in these conversations because it's that which is indisputable. There is the basic fact of hearing this voice. This voice is a sound. To step away from the basic fact of the hearing and to go into what the hearing means is that secondary interpretation. It's relatively true, but it's not absolute. We suffer from this belief in absolutes, the fallacy of absolutes. As a thing, this table is absolute, but it's not. There is no table. Really, what there is the process of feeling. It isn't an absolute thing called Nick speaking, or even voice, or even sound. It's hearing. So we are whistling away our assumptions, and we're feeling into the truth, this experiencing. You can't divorce yourself from experiencing or awareness. Even when you believe you are a person having an experience, that whole thing there, that whole formulation is saturated with pure experiencing. The basic fact of happening.
We think we're a person experiencing, and as it turns out, this person is appearing within seamless, limitless, boundless experiencing. And actually, you can easily deconstruct what the person thing is in the experience. It's just kind of it's a bunch of memories, thoughts, feelings, and it's a flow. It's always flowing. There's not a static thing called a person. It seems to have continuity, but that's according to memory. So there's actually only now, and within that now, time arises as an experience, as something we draw into experience, I should say, not an actual experience. It's something we layer over the top of this just seamless flowing of reality. It's so simple that it's always overlooked, and always the stories are always so seductive and so much more interesting, apparently, than the basic fact that makes up the stories, that the stories are made of, that anything is made of. The fact that you're able to perceive something called a story is powerful. It's a miracle. It's the divine itself, it's infinity itself, it's reality itself. That power that creates universes enables what you think of as you to perceive something called a story, or to see the sight of this room, or to sense yourself sitting on the chair, or whatever it is that you're apparently doing. It allows that your direct experiencing that fact is that power that is infusing everything. As our what we call ego self, we see everything as a mistake from that point of view. It's kind of a perspective. It's a small-minded perspective. Everything kind of seems to be a mistake. I like this, I hate that, and that's the dualistic perspective. Our temptation is to try and leave stuff out of reality, or push it out of reality somehow. We don't do it purposefully. We do it all the time without even realizing it. We subtly try to push stuff out of infinity, outside of God, outside of the divine, and go, this over here, this flower that's perfect and beautiful and smells great, is of course the divine. It's of course, and that dog crap on the pavement is, well, that's outside of that. That's clearly just an accident, a mistake that shouldn't be there. It needs to be quickly get rid of it so no one sees it, that kind of thing. That's how we see reality. It's pure expression of whatever this is. It's just this perpetual isness, this flowing of reality. It can't be other.
Yeah, none of it is a mistake, is it?
Because it is. The fact that it is, it means it's been allowed in. It is a portal to God.
Absolutely. The ego is this kind of management system. It tries to manage, and fails every time, what is allowed in reality and what is not allowed. Certain appearances are not allowed, others are allowed. So this ego, which has to be said is only a phantom, is a composite of the energies of fear and desire, pushing out, attempting to bring it in. And what's overlooked in that process is the expression of the highest, even what seems to be the lowest. It's all an expression of the ultimate. Well, the absolute and the relative are they're not divided. So what the ego is this sort of attempt at micromanaging facets of experience. And those facets are the expression of God.
Yeah.
That whole process of management is painful. It doesn't lead to anything fruitful. I don't know who said it first, but this is why the ego has been described as edging God out. That's all the pattern called the ego is doing. It's edging expressions of God out and attempting to bring other expressions in to this moment. But as we've said before on a previous podcast, experiencing is the great equalizer. Every experience held within experiencing and also made of pure experiencing is equal in nature, is equal in appreciation.
Yeah.
It's not like awareness is more aware of some things and less aware of other things. Awareness holds all of it with utter equality. Is there anything here that you're not aware of? And is there anything here that you are less aware of? There's only pure awareness, and all of what arises in awareness is actually arising as awareness. So not only equality, but also sameness, seamless omnipresence throughout. The thing is, though, this ego pattern then hears this and says, well, how do I stop edging God out? How do I stop desiring and fearing? How do I just allow? How do I surrender?
Yeah.
You see, those questions are still coming from desire and fear, and will lead only to more desire and fear. So, in a way, they're innocent questions, but they're the wrong questions. It's only about seeing what already is. It's only about recognizing, only about appreciating the isness of life, the just isness of experiencing. It's only about recognizing, not about cultivating, not about attaining, not about seeking something beyond what's here. It's about waking up to what is here. It's a wakefulness. It's an enlightenment that is already present, a clarity, a pure radiance that is already here. It's not that you can become enlightened or awake. You are enlightened. You are this enlightening factor, this space of wakefulness. And to ask who becomes awake or who recognizes this kind of goes back to the pattern of the ego with its desire and fear. It's the wrong question. Awareness seems to be able to be aware of itself. God seems to be able to wake up to God's self. But that's what it is. It's self-knowing. It doesn't have to become self-knowing. This right here is self-knowingness. It's self-evident. It is self-shining. There is no separate you or separate ego that has to attain that.
Only an ego would want to get rid of an ego. Only an ego would go to war with an ego and seek something higher. But what you are is not at war with anything. It's more like a kind of remembering what it actually is, that it never was the ego thing. It never was this kind of little identity or this little composite of fears and ideas and dislikes and likes and dualistic interpretations. From an ego's point of view, there seems to be something higher to gain. And it's like, no, it's always totally been present. It's always here. It's just overlooked. Just kind of remember who you are prior to the ego. It's like you've just become so identified with these ideas that are being presented.
That's it. The ego is simply a pattern. No different than a pattern of a flowing stream, a certain patterning of water.
Yeah. It's like the rain or something, it's kind of just like a pattern of energy, and there's nothing wrong with it, actually. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just made itself into the manager. And actually, it only takes up a very small part of your experience, and you're the experiencing, which is so not limited to an ego. It's like, there's this grain of sand in my experience. And it's like choosing to get your microscope out and let the grain of sand take up your whole experience. And It's like, no, it's taking up a tiny part of your experience. Like, it's not anything that needs to be avoided or gone to war with or anything like that. Just see what it actually is. And that's where the power in this, going directly to your presence, directly to your experience, directly to the texture of this arising, this happening, or of reality that you're experiencing right now, not any other time, right now. That's where the power is, because it cuts straight through that. It cuts straight through by going straight to your experience, straight to the texture, the feel of your experience. You bypass the mind, you bypass the ego, you bypass all of it, and just go straight to the actual power of what this is, this experiencing.
That's it. It's worth pointing out that we're not talking about spiritual bypassing, because actually, just to define bypassing in this context, it is to overlook the truth of what is and to jump into the absolute concepts which seem to define what is, which can never define what is. That's the bypass.
Yeah.
So whenever you call a table, you're bypassing what that actually is. And it's totally innocent, and that bypassing is part of what is. But you could say that the ego is a sort of overlooking of the seamless, eternal, infinite isness of what is. When in a truer sense, there can be no overlooking. The overlooking is an expression of that one self, that singular self, that unlimited, timeless self, that all is. So the overlooking is the self.
Yeah.
The overlooked is the self.
You realise there's nothing to overlook into, so there is only that. There is only infinity. And so the ending of overlooking, but also realising the overlooking not to be a problem. There's a difference between having that as an idea and knowing it, and knowing it undoubtedly, and if you know it undoubtedly, anything's kind of allowed to arise, and there's kind of a lightness to it. God is still God, reality is still reality, Brahman's still Brahman, Buddha mind still Buddha mind, whatever you want to call it. It's still is what it is.
Before one studies Zen, mountains are mountains and waters are waters. That's a sort of overlooking or bypassing. In the interpretation, that's a mountain. These are waters. The quote goes on, after a first glimpse into the truth of Zen, mountains are no longer mountains and waters are no longer waters. So you peel back those concepts, those assumptions, those inherited judgments, and you go, oh, how could I have ever believed that there were such things called mountains and waters? How could I have believed that the word was the expression? And then it finishes off with saying, after enlightenment, mountains are once again mountains and waters are once again waters. So there's this sort of reclamation of the meaning making.
That's it, yeah.
But it's held with looseness and clarity. Life is seen to be okay with its appearance as mountains and waters. It's this sort of built-in permission to manifest that way, because actually it's never limited that way. So it's like, and experientially, that's a sort of relief. It's like, oh, right, okay. So life can appear as a table, but it's not just what it is. There's so much richness in that appearance called table, beyond the mundane, concretized form. It's mountain and not mountain. It's not one or the other.
No.
You are infinite. You are big enough to hold every polarity, every duality, and none of those dualities affect you. They can't change what you are, your pure potential. this basic fact of experiencing can appear as any experience, and any experience is never not the experiencing fact itself. No thing is absolute. Everything is the absolute.
That's why everything feels so heavy and compressed and tight, is because we're trying to compress everything down into tiny spaces called words. Reality will not be compressed down into that. Reality just is what it is.
Yeah. It's like seeing a block of ice as only a block of ice. It is ice. It will always be ice.
Yeah.
Ice is its true nature, which goes without saying is not true.
Well, yeah. Ice can also be water. It changes form. And that's how everything is, though. You know, it's a weird thing. We've tried to isolate everything. I tried to stop everything from its flux. It's like I'm moving, I'm alive. I'm a stream flowing, and then we've got no, stop. We don't like it when you move. We like stability. We like it to be, you know, ice. Just stay there. We like stasis because we know where we are. But there's no stasis to be found. So the true safety is to flow with the water, you know, flow with it.
Well, it's not even to let go or to surrender to the flow. It's just to be the flow, be the water. And you don't have to become the flow. You don't have to become the water. You know, on a relative experiential level, it's only to notice. It's only to notice that you are the flow, and that's where the true safety is.
How can you not be safe? I mean, you are reality itself. The idea of not being safe is just an idea. It's a story. And we've believed it. And everyone's believed it for so long that we believe, and it's kind of like just assumed we're not safe.
That's it. And that's another function of the ego pattern. It's to seek security because it overlooks this inherent safety. And the shadow of security is insecurity. So it perceives a world of insecurity and tries to establish security because it overlooks the safety in what is, the safety as what is.
Yeah.
And maybe on one level we intuit that what we are is reality.
Yeah. You know, if the second you think you're just this little thing that's appearing in your experience and that it's vulnerable and it can be taken out at any point, that feels very unsafe. If you really look into your experience, your direct experience, without taking stories into account, without taking anything else into account, just your direct experience, your direct intuition, there is a feeling of safety there, isn't there? Like there's a feeling of, there's a knowing there, and you can't really say what it is. Because you can't say what it is. It can't be said. It's not intellectual. It's not logical. It's not confined to logic or intellect or any of that. It's just the isness of reality itself as you know, as this appearance, as this expression. And that is the safety, is that knowing. We're sort of these bubbles going around in the ocean of reality. And when you see what you truly are, like the bubble pops, it could be said, for a second, and all that's left is the ocean. The ocean. It's just ocean. And then the bubble, you know, these are magic bubbles, of course, so they can come back online at any time.
Yeah.
And that's our situation. We are simultaneously swimming in the ocean of reality and are the ocean of reality. You know, it's a both and situation. We are functioning through as these human roles but in the bigger context of things, we are the ocean itself, and we can't possibly be separated from it.
Yeah. And ultimately, there are no bubbles. What is the bubble made of? Okay, well, its outer shell is made of water, clearly. What's inside the bubble? It's nothing. And that's all it is. What the bubble ego entity is the perception of lack, the perception of disconnection, the perception of lack of water and the water being reality, and the perception of disconnection from the entirety. And it's only ever wholeness and abundance of what you are as the ocean, appearing temporarily as a finite bubble, but never absolutely that.
It's like waking up from a dream, really. An idea pops.
Yeah.
Lucid dreaming is quite a good example. You're dreaming and then you realise, oh, I was in bed the whole time. It's nothing actually changed, though, other than your experience changes, your quality of experience changes, because you absolutely know when you have your lucid dream. You absolutely know. There's no doubt. It's like, oh, okay, I know I'm dreaming. But actually, that was always the case. You were always dreaming. You were always actually not in the dream. You were always kind of like relatively in bed. You realise there's nothing to seek because it was always what it is, and you've just realised it. It's like a recognition. This is why it's just said it's like a remembrance or a recognition or realising. It's not a big grand enlightenment thing, and finally I'll be sitting on the throne as the king of reality, and everyone will kiss my feet and stuff. I mean, that might happen, but it's not necessary. It's just a seeing through of what wasn't true.
You're just recognizing what it already is. That's it. So there is this ocean of omnipresent sentience, this dynamic witnessing, this perfect, brilliant being. And along the way, there's a sense of being an individual. An individual is to be divided in duality, individual. And it's only ever a sense, it's only ever a belief. An individual has to seek the ocean by means of inclusion and exclusion. Always, therefore, overlooking the basic fact of completion. There is only the non-dual appearing in any way, not affected by any appearance. If any of it was a mistake, it wouldn't be happening. It just is part and parcel, inherently accepted, all experience.
It's like unfolding, and then at a certain point of unfoldment, it becomes incredibly obvious. You are saturated with what you're seeking for.
Yeah.
I can only speak from my experience, of course, but at some point, that became obvious. Prior to that, it wasn't obvious. And there was this process that seemed like seeking happening, where there was a real searching for something which I knew intuitively to be true, but I couldn't quite see it. I just couldn't. It was like right in front of my face, but I couldn't see it. It's just a realizing of, oh, this has always been the case.
Yeah. On an experiential relative level, that popping of the bubble is seen to be like a relaxation into reality. And for the body, mind, that's a relief. Nisargadatta said, when it is understood that the body is not oneself, then one loses one's individuality and merges in the total manifestation. There is no self and no other. You are the everlasting, timeless, spaceless principle which gives sentience to the body. This is the most secret, but the simplest principle as far as spiritual knowledge is concerned. The person merges into the witness into awareness, awareness into pure being. Yet identity is not lost. Only its limitations are lost. It is transfigured.
What is, as in reality itself, God itself, subsumes the ego, the character, into what it already was. Identity is not lost. It's just opened up into what it actually originally was, and the ego doesn't do anything, basically. The ego is subsumed into, so it's not a position from the ego getting over from here to there. It's a subsuming of reality, of its that expression as that person into itself as what it truly is.